So what are the implications for policy makers? An immediate implication is that policymakers may need to shift their mindsets. The low inflation environment gave central banks great, if not unprecedented, leeway to place more weight on other objectives, be they growth, full employment, or others further beyond their traditional remit. The current flare-up has highlighted the underlying constraints on policy, and it has prompted central banks to act. Central banks may also need to reassess how they respond to inflation resulting from supply-side developments. The good news is that central banks are awake to the risks. It seems clear that policy rates need to rise to levels that are more appropriate for the higher inflation environment.
Inflation in Asia has been relatively, or more modest certainly, compared to what we've seen in other parts of the world, both advanced economies and with Latin American economies. I think that reflects a couple of factors. One is that the recovery in Asia has been more muted and slower than it has been in other economies. And also the impact of government mechanisms to try to mitigate the impact of some of the price rises that we've seen. We see, for example, that energy inflation in Asia, in the ASEAN 5 countries, is significantly less, for example, than that we've seen in the advanced economies. First off, I think the most important thing that we can do is to keep our houses in order, to ensure domestic financial stability. If each house is in order, then the likelihood or the probability of having spillovers affect other countries is that much less. So I think, again, the fact that we've managed to build good track record in terms of policy, build good buffers over time, all that has contributed to our regional stability because each of the countries have fairly frameworks in place. The second is to try to enhance the things that we can try to do to enhance resiliency, regional resiliency. And then one thing I think that would be helpful is to increase our use of local currencies, reduce our overdependence on major currencies. And I think there are a couple of initiatives that are worth pursuing. In Thailand, for example, one thing that we've done is introduce greater local currency settlement frameworks. And we've seen a greater share of local currency usage in the arrangements that we've had with Thailand, between Thailand and Malaysia and Thailand and Indonesia. They account for about 16% of our trade right now.
That whatever financial instruments we invent in order to protect us from or reduce the cost of inflation, they do not eliminate the cost of inflation. They are only reducing the cost and maybe distorting it. And the reason why I mentioned it is that in some of the countries where high inflation is still in place, the difficulty of stabilizing is arising from various indexation clauses, because indexation carries the past into the future, and you don't want always to carry the past if you want to change the trajectory on which you are. The currency of denomination, therefore, and the idea of foreign currency denominated loans versus domestic currency denominated loans is a very important one.